With all this talk about UFOs lately, or UAPs as they're calling them now, it really makes you think.
It really
It
does.
makes you think that this whole fascination with the unexplained, it's not new, is it?
No, not at all.
It's like it's built into us somehow.
I think so. It
Mhm.
goes way beyond, just blurry photos and shaky videos. We're
Mm.
talking about centuries of stories and accounts really from all over the world.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to be diving into today.
That's right.
Not necessarily to prove or disprove aliens, but to really kind of explore, how people throughout history have perceived these aerial anomalies. We've got a whole bunch of sources here, ancient texts, declassified military reports. I'm really curious to see what we find.
I think it's going to be fascinating to see how these sightings were interpreted, through the lens of whatever culture and time period they occurred in.
So like 1,000 years ago, if you saw something weird up there, you might think, oh, it's a god.
Right, exactly. A
Mhm.
good example of that is the Vimana ancient flying machines
Hmm.
that are described in Indian texts like the
Mm.
Mahabharata
Oh, yeah.
and the Ramayana. And to those who wrote these texts, these weren't alien spacecraft. They were chariots of the gods.
That is so cool. It makes you wonder if maybe there's a little truth in some of these old myths. What if they were seeing something real, but they just didn't have the words for it?
Yeah, it's a really compelling thought.
Yeah.
And we find this in other ancient cultures too. Roman historians wrote about flying shields appearing in the sky.
Wow.
And we don't know for sure what they saw, but it does suggest that humans have been looking up and seeing unusual things for a really long time.
So you've got ancient India, ancient Rome. What about as we go through time?
As we move into like the medieval period, we see these sightings taking on a different meaning.
Okay.
They start to be viewed through a religious lens, often seen as signs from God, omens of good or bad fortune.
Oh, so like a comet might be a sign of doom.
Exactly. A great example of this, the Nuremberg event of 1561. It was so strange that it was actually recorded in the local newspaper, the Nuremberg Gazette.
Wait a minute, they had newspapers back then.
They did.
That's amazing. What did it say?
Well, basically, people saw an aerial battle shapes in the sky, spheres, cylinders, clashing with each other. And then some people even said they saw this large black triangular object come down, and it looked like it crashed outside the city walls.
A triangular object. That sounds familiar. It sounds like some of the stuff people are talking about now. I mean, could there be a connection?
It's a good question. Are we seeing echoes of the same phenomena, but just interpreted through different, ways of thinking?
So we've got chariots of the gods. We've got signs from God.
Right.
What happens when we get closer to modern times?
Well, we move into the 19th century, a time before airplanes. Remember, you start to see all these reports of airships.
Airships, so like blimps and zeppelins. But those weren't around yet, right?
Exactly. But this was a time when the idea of powered flight was starting to really capture everyone's imagination. So these sightings, they were really detailed. Sometimes people even said they could see pilots and searchlights. It really caught the public's attention.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, can you imagine seeing something like that back then when the only things in the sky were birds?
Right. Where were they seeing these airships?
All over the world, but especially in the U.S. between 1896 and 1897. Newspapers were filled with accounts from all sorts of people, farmers, businessmen, even law enforcement, all describing these mysterious airships.
What did they think they were seeing?
There's a lot of speculation. Some people said hoaxes, some people said misidentified natural phenomena, others thought they were secret government projects or maybe inventions from some, unknown genius inventor.
So already we're seeing this mix of skepticism and wonder that seems to go hand in hand with so many UFO sightings. It feels like we're on the verge of the modern UFO era here.
We are.
So what happens next?
Well, the 20th century brings us to an event that really changes how we think about UFOs. 1947, the world's about to hear two words, flying saucers.
1947. That's a big year, isn't it?
Sure.
That's when we get the two events that really launched the modern UFO era.
Right. It all starts with a pilot named Kenneth Arnold. He's flying near Mount Rainier when he sees these 9 crescent-shaped objects just zipping past his plane at unbelievable speeds.
And he describes them as skipping like saucers.
Hmm.
And the media picks up on that, and boom, flying saucers are everywhere.
So that's where we get that term from. It's amazing how one event can shape our language and how we understand something. But 1947 also gave us another event that's almost legendary, the Roswell incident.
At Roswell. It's the most famous UFO case of all time. A rancher finds some strange debris in the New Mexico desert. The military shows up, offers confusing explanations, and then the rumors start flying. A crashed alien spaceship, a government cover-up.
Roswell, man, that's a whole other deep dive. I remember reading about that as a kid. It just captivated me.
It's a story that still fascinates people to this day.
Yeah.
The official explanation, a crashed weather balloon. A lot of people don't buy it. But whatever happened, Roswell really put UFOs on the map.
It feels like after Roswell, things really start to ramp up. Do governments start getting more involved in investigating these sightings?
They do. There are so many reports, especially after Roswell, they can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah.
So we enter this era of official UFO investigations. Governments all over the world are trying to figure out what's going on up there.
Which brings us to Project Blue Book, right? The Air Force's attempt to solve the UFO mystery.
Exactly. Project Blue Book ran from 1952 to 1969. They collected thousands of reports, interviewed witnesses, and tried to figure out what was behind these unexplained aerial phenomena.
So, did they find any evidence of aliens? What did they conclude?
Officially, they said most cases were just misidentified aircraft weather phenomena, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But a small percentage of cases remained unexplained, even after they investigated thoroughly.
Interesting. So even the Air Force, with all its resources, couldn't explain everything they were seeing. I bet that just fueled the fire for people who believe something truly strange is going on.
Oh, absolutely. The fact that some cases remain unexplained even after government investigation just made the mystery deeper and led to even more speculation.
It's like the more the government tried to debunk UFO sightings, the more convinced people became that they were hiding something. This back and forth between skepticism and belief, it seems like a recurring theme throughout UFO history.
It really is. And as we move into the latter half of the 20th century, we see a shift away from just government-led investigations to a more global and multifaceted approach to understanding UFOs.
So it's not just an American thing anymore.
Nope. We've already talked about Nuremberg back in the 16th century, but as we get deeper into the 20th century, we see some really interesting cases popping up all over the world.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, there's the Westall UFO encounter in Australia in 1966. Over 200 witnesses, mostly school children and teachers, saw this silver-gray, disc-shaped object come down into a field. It stayed there for a bit and then took off again really fast.
200 witnesses. That's a lot of people. It doesn't sound like mass hysteria or a simple misidentification.
Right, and the Westall case is just one of many that shows that this is a global phenomenon. These cases often challenge our usual explanations.
So we've got ancient accounts, medieval interpretations, the birth of the flying saucer government investigations, and now it's happening all over the world. UFO sightings have been with us for a long time. But what about more recently? What are some of the cases that have really grabbed people's attention and pushed the boundaries of what we thought we knew?
One case that stands out is the 2004 Nimitz encounter. This involved U.S. Navy pilots who encountered this tic-tac-shaped object off the coast of California.
Tic-tac shaped like the candy.
Yeah, that's what they said. They said it was maneuvering in ways that seemed to defy physics. What's really important about this case is that it was backed up by radar data, and the Pentagon even officially acknowledged it.
Wow. So this wasn't just some blurry photo. This was trained military personnel with advanced technology seeing something truly unusual.
Exactly. The Nimitz encounter, along with some other recently declassified military encounters, has really changed the conversation about UFOs. Okay. This isn't about fringe theories anymore. We're talking about credible witnesses and data that needs to be taken seriously by scientists.
It feels like we're entering a whole new era of UFO research, one that's more open, more based on evidence, and maybe more willing to consider that we might not be alone.